with me in studio to share their reporting and their insights. CNN's Dana Bash, CNN's Evan Perez, the former federal prosecutor Shan Wu, and CNN's Jamie Gangel. Jamie, let's walk as clearly as we can about what we do know and what we don't know in terms of what was discovered. Your reporting is the search of a private office, lawyers involved because the former vice president, now president, knew there was sensitive family materials in there. He wanted somebody sensitive looking at them. They come across an envelope, open it up, and...
So, by and large, I think we have to underscore 98, 99% of what is found in this office is absolutely personal Biden material, including things like the arrangements for his son Beau's funeral, condolence letters. But what happens is, as they're going through the boxes, the lawyer who is doing it because these were confidential family materials, opens a box and there is a plain manila envelope that says it's stamped VP Personal. So maybe that's how this all happened. When it got packed up, someone thought it was personal. The lawyer opens the envelope and there is something that says classified right there. He closes the envelope. Houston, we have a problem. He makes the appropriate calls. He says to the National Archives, come and get it. What we know is that when they go through, there were about 3 or 4 boxes that did not appear once they started going through them to have just personal things. And what they find, a number of records that are unclassified but fall under the Presidential Records Act. And then they find 10 documents that are classified. And what my source says is they include intelligence memos, national security memos, background briefing memos that cover areas from Iran, Ukraine, and the UK.
All right, wait, we'll come back to this for more. Now I just going to, where are we in this investigation? The president is overseas right now, well, he's south of the border, out of the country, with the Attorney General of the United States, who, when he got wind of this, decided he wanted somebody who he could say was impartial to look at this. So the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney in Chicago looks at this. What's the process?
Right. So John Lausch, who's the one of the few Trump appointees who has remained in the current Justice Department, he has been doing a review with the FBI, and this is a standard process. This happens actually, more often than people realize, not just with former presidents, obviously, and the former vice presidents. So the FBI has a process where they take a look at these documents to try to understand, whether they're still classified, who owns that information, which intelligence agency would own that information, and then whether there's been any harm done to national security as a result of them being stored in a place where they should not have been. And clearly, this is what the case where what happened here. What I understand has happened now is that Lausch and his team have completed at least the initial part of this, and they've come back to the Justice Department. They've come back to Merrick Garland, and the Attorney General faces an important decision. It's sort of like an inflection point of this investigation, which is, what do we do next? Do we open a formal, full-blown investigation? And having seen Merrick Garland operate, Chris Wray operate, I think, we've seen them try to make sure that they make sure everything is done by the book, cross every T, dot every I. So I think that's where I would suspect we go next.
And so let's try to bring in facts and intersect them with the inevitable politics. This is getting more attention than maybe it might otherwise because of Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, and all the documents found at Mar-a-Lago. From what we know so far, and let's keep an open mind that we will learn more, but from what we know so far, there are some significant and very, very important factual differences. That doesn't mean politically. We'll get to the politics in a minute. You see the Republicans bring in the Congress, let's investigate, see, everybody does it, here we go. But in Biden's case, fewer than 12 documents, some top secret, U.S. attorney investigating, and again, based on what we know right now, his attorneys found this, immediately raised their hand and said, we have a problem, please, what's the process? In Trump's case, 160-plus documents, 60 top secret. He's been under investigation. He had lawyers sign off that all of them were returned. They found out they were not returned. This went on for months and months and months, and in fact is still ongoing. What do you see as the differences we know right now from a legal perspective, and what are your questions for the Biden team in this current context?
Yeah, from a legal perspective, it's totally different kinds of cases. I mean, everything from the way that the lawyers behaved in terms of immediately turning it over to the transparency that they're now saying they've appointed not appointed, they assigned, difference, a particular U.S. attorney to look at the preliminary investigation. The questions are simply going to be factual ones, John. How did the documents get there? And that'll take a little bit of work because it happened a while back. They need to trace that. How secure were they in that particular room? And probably the most important question, did President Biden know that the documents were there? Did he have any role in packing them up?
And so we may get some answers later today. The president is supposed to take questions. He has refused to take shouted questions during his events in Mexico. His staff saying he wants to focus on the very, very important business that he's discussing there. He is supposed to have a more of a news conference-like event later today where we should get answers. One of the things he's going to have to answer for, and again, the facts as we know them so far are very different. President Biden, former President Trump, they're very different. But this is Joe Biden talking about Donald Trump. He's going to have to answer for this.
When you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself, looking at that image?
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
Again, the facts are different, but the totally irresponsible part. Joe Biden, 40 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president. His calling card is, I know how to do the sensitive stuff. I know how to do the hard stuff. I don't make these kind of mistakes. Even if it's an honest mistake, there's a trail. When these documents are removed from a sensitive place, somebody knows they were removed. There's a log. They go out. They go to a file. Now he's going to have to answer for this.
My understanding is that he knows he's going to have to answer for it, is prepared to do it when he faces reporters later today when he's in Mexico, and that there is a very clear-eyed understanding of the politics of this inside the Biden administration.
Right, forgive me for interrupting, but Trump doesn't do nuance. He's just going to say, see, he does it too, everybody does it.
Well, this is a problem because it is very hard to explain. You have to have people who are willing to listen beyond the, see, I told you so. And in our polarized environment, it's hard to get people to listen. There is the explanation for why they're there, we still do not know. Right. And I don't think we're going to know until the investigation is over. And my understanding is that the president is going to be careful with that because of the DOJ inquiry, maybe not an investigation yet. But when it comes to the facts that you just laid out in that graphic, that is what you are going to hear from the president. And he's right. They are very, very different situations. The Trump situation was he or his people took classified information and then misled or even lied to the National Archives and the federal government about what he had, to the point where they had to go raid. The Biden people found something in a closet, according to your excellent reporting, Jamie. As soon as they found it, they turned it over. It's past tense. It's done. It's not ongoing.
Now, so in Trump's case, the evidence we've seen before us is they proactively took documents as they knew they were shutting down and had them shipped to Mar-a-Lago. Do we know the answer to this question when it comes to Biden? Were these documents brought? Because it is perfectly appropriate and perfectly normal if you have had a clearance in the past and you're a former government official, say you're writing a book, or you're about to take an important international trip, or you're about to take a phone call from an international leader. Maybe you're helping the current administration. Maybe you're doing something on your own as part of some issue. If you still have your clearance, you can see documents to prepare for trips, to prepare for calls. They're supposed to go back. Do we know the chain of command on these documents yet?
We don't. Yeah, we absolutely don't. But I do want to point out, just for context, that speaking with sources who are very familiar with the National Archives in cases like this in the past, this happens. It happens with former presidents. It happens with former vice presidents. Right. It happens with high-level intelligence officials, where there have been cases where someone died, a widow was going through a closet, found a folder, and said, whoops, we shouldn't have this. Or a university finds papers. Those are considered honest mistakes and oversights. They get returned. They have normally not been referred. But my sources say that this feels to them like an honest mistake at this point, and that if it wasn't for Trump and Mar-a-Lago, they would not have referred.
But that's the box the Attorney General's in now.
Right. Once you cross that bridge, and of course, it's understandable why the archives felt they needed to make the referral. But for the Justice Department, obviously, there are some important facts here, including the fact that, this one of these briefing papers has a reference to Ukraine. What does that mean? We don't know, again, the details of this, but that leads to important, questions out there as to whether this has anything to do with the president's son, right? People are going to ask those questions, and I think it's important for the White House, for the president, to try to at least answer some of those to try to clarify. Even if, again, there's limited information that they may be able to present, but they do need to clarify some of this.
To me, this is the biggest political weakness here, apart from the fact that this is a political gift to Trump and the Republicans. If the Biden White House had been completely transparent and was able to say, this has happened, this was what was in there, then we wouldn't be saying, what is it? Is there any relation?
But it is classified.
And there's an argument that they are doing the right thing by just being quiet and giving it to DOJ, let the archives and DOJ run with it and not make some sort of public statement to get out in front of it.
So who has the authority, if there's nothing about Hunter Biden in these documents, to say that at some point? Because you know what's going to happen. If that's a question that needs to be answered, affirmatively or negatively, in the political environment we live in. Who has the authority to do that?
Merrick Garland. And this really puts him in the box because his preoccupation with not looking political, if he appoints a special counsel here after the preliminary findings are basically innocuous, he's just creating a mountain out of nothing.
Well, House Republicans are going to ask these questions in the House. It'll be fascinating to see if the president's own party, the Democrats, who run the Senate, decide we're going to do this as well. That's a big question going forward. When they can carefully, in accordance with classified information, air this out to the degree they can. Big questions. Up next for us, neighborly but still difficult.